So we're going to do a review of photosynthesis and respiration. We're going to start with the equations. And remember that things go into the equation are called reactants. Things that come out are the products. So we have sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water that go in. The sun obviously speaks for itself. That's the energy that powers photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide from the leaves and water from the roots. The oxygen is then given off or stored for respiration later on, and glucose is also either given off or eaten by others or used by the plant itself. Where does this happen? If we're going to look at it from the broadest sense, the leaf is an organ made up of tissues called mesophyll tissues. So if we take a cross section here, and those tissues are made up of cells, plant cells, or mesophyll cells that we know have these little organelles called chloroplasts in them. If we look at chloroplasts in a little bit more detail, we see that inside of the chloroplast, they have these stacks of what looks like coins. The stacks are called granum, and plural is grana. The actual coins are called thylakoids, and then there's the sticky jelly-like stuff around it, and that space is called the stroma. So part of the photosynthesis happens across these membranes, and part of it happens out in the stroma. It's chlorophyll, a pigment in plants that actually attracts the sunlight. And so to talk about pigment and help you understand that, you have to know that it's going to reflect certain wavelengths of light, chlorophyll A and B, and it absorbs others. So let's look at 3 different examples here. Plants we know look green, and that's because they reflect the green wavelength of light. So think of like a mirror where you see a reflection. It doesn't actually go into it. It's bouncing off. So that's what we see. So in plants, it's actually the red, the blue, and the purple that get absorbed. So that's actually what's powering photosynthesis. If you have on a blue shirt, what's reflecting is that blue color, whereas the red and the green would be absorbed in what is actually causing energy or heat to be felt in that shirt. And then finally, when all colors are absorbed and none are reflected, we see black. And that's why during the summertime or in a lot of heat, you actually tend to get warmer if you have on dark clothing. So now that we know that photosynthesis happens when that green chlorophyll pigment in chloroplast attracts the sunlight, let's look at the 2 different parts. And there's 2 different pictures here that both show the same thing. I'm going to start with this one on the bottom. The first part is called the light reactions. A water molecule is split by the energy from the sun. 2 low energy molecules are then energized. Oxygen is given off, and these 2 high energy molecules are shipped to a different part of the chloroplast in the stroma, where carbon dioxide is converted into sugar with these high energy molecules. And notice those are just getting shuffled back and forth. And so in the process of this, we see that oxygen is given off and sugar is made. Photosynthesis happens in certain organisms that we call producers or autotrophs. So plants, some protists like algae, and prokaryotes or bacteria. Respiration, if you notice, which is the exact opposite, happens in all living things. And in respiration, we start out with glucose and oxygen, and we're making ATP, giving off carbon dioxide and water. In eukaryotic cells, respiration happens in the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is an organelle that has an inner membrane and an outer membrane. The very middle space is called the matrix, and these little bumps are called the cristae. There are 2 different forms of respiration. If oxygen is present, we say that it's aerobic. And if oxygen is not present, we say it's anaerobic. Step 1 in either one of those is glycolysis. Step 2, if oxygen is present, is called the Krebs cycle, and step 3 is the electron transport chain. If oxygen is not present, we still start out with glycolysis, but we go to fermentation. And depending on the type of cells, it can be lactic acid fermentation or alcoholic fermentation. Aerobic respiration, if oxygen is present, it's a lot more efficient. We make 36 to 38 ATP, and it's sustainable. Whereas anaerobic respiration is a lot less efficient. It makes less ATP, only 2, and it's a good short-term fix. Remember that prokaryotes do not have organelles, so they have to go through both photosynthesis